Welcome back to another action-packed episode of the Deadly Podcast Kung Fu, brought to you by the Villain's Demand, where myself, Justin Raymer, traverses the worlds of Marvel's most prolific martial artists in Iron Fist, Shang-Chi, and the White Tiger. If you want to keep up with the podcast, you can do so over on social media platforms, Twitter, X, Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky. And if you want to keep up with myself, Justin Raymer, you can do so over on Twitter, X, Instagram, and Blue Sky. Did I mention Threads for the podcast? I don't know. I shouldn't record these so early in the morning. But instead of plugging the last tavern on the left, because hopefully you're listening to our epic comic book TTRPG, where my characters are playing Doctor Doom, Turtle Ranger, Donatello, now Metalhead, and Kid Goku with the Masters of the Universe Sword of Power, I'm going to go ahead and plug my little boy's YouTube channel, Bubba's Crazy Dinos, where him and myself, Dad, review and discuss dinosaur and kaiju related toys. Yes, my kid wants to do YouTube. He does not realize the amount of work that goes into editing. Not that it's a lot for what we do. It's nothing fancy, but he doesn't realize that Dad's got a lot going on, and this just makes this harder to do, but hey. He's my son. I love him. That's what we're going to do. But anyways, today, well, maybe he'll inherit this one day. I'll probably catch up with all the issues by the time he can inherit it. And at the rate that we're going, he'll only have to cover like 4 issues a year. Probably have to add some characters to this. But anyways, yeah. Okay, so today, let's go ahead and continue on as we're moving forward with the story of Lin Lie on his journey to Iron Fist. As of now, I've covered all of the Swordmaster series, except for Masterclass. I'm saving that for whenever I get to Agents of Atlas. I have just recently covered the King in Black Knight issue, which is very important to the story of Lin Lie. And today, we are covering the next important story before Lin Lie becomes Iron Fist, the death of Doctor Strange, White Fox. Now, much like with Black Knight, I will not really dive into the White Fox side of this story. It's really good. Very interesting character. I like her design, what I've seen of her in this book outside of... Well, I don't think I've ever read anything else with her. Because I not got around to reading those Agents of Atlas books. Maybe she was in War of the Realms Agent of Atlas. I don't remember. It's been so long ago since I've read that, and I don't remember a whole bunch about it. So yeah, I'm really much like the recent Dane Whitman stuff. Since I've read that Black Knight story, I will probably dive into more White Tiger. She can't have that many issues available to read. But let's go ahead and go on. The Death of Doctor Strange, White Fox was released on December 1st, 2021, along with 23 other titles from Marvel Comics. None of them are relevant to this podcast, so we're not going to go over the list. The creative team for the story is your writer, Alyssa Wong. Your penciler goes to Andy Tong and Luciano Vecchio. They are also the ink team. Arif Prianto is your colorist. Travis Latham is your letterer. And Tom Groneman is your editor. Your main cover sees White Fox with the silhouette of her kumiho, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, kumiho form. Rico is your artist there. We get a Nyakali. Man, I hate pronouncing his name because I feel like I butcher it every time. We've got a cover with her and Lin Lie fighting some demons. And the second one is by the one artist everybody goes nuts for these days, which is Peach Momoko. I'm not saying I don't like her art. I'm not saying I love her art. But her story in Darth Vader Black, White, and Red is amazing. Like, the imagery in that story blew my mind. That's all her. Every bit of it. Like you cannot take no credit from her. It was amazing. And then I've never read anything that she's wrote that I'm aware of besides that, but it was pretty awesome. So, and just the art direction and, like I said, the imagery that she used to tell that story is pretty badass. But let's go ahead and move on with this story. After the death of Doctor Strange, all manner of extra-dimensional threats have begun to attack the world. In Seoul, South Korea, Tiger Division is caught up in a fierce battle against demons. As a massive fiend begins to eat Takuchi, White Fox orders Auntie to immobilize it so they can take it down. With the threat defeated, Mr. Enigma realizes each wave is becoming stronger and stronger. Meanwhile, in Cebu, Philippines, Swordmaster and Wave are dealing with threats themselves. Easily dispatching the demons, Jimmy Woo summons them back to Age of Atlantis headquarters. Both begin to protest due to more demons needing to be neutralized, but when they see his reasoning to why, they quickly understand. Back at Tiger Division base, the team learns another kumiho has been seen attacking Chungcheongnam, South Korea. White Fox is shocked to learn another of her extinct race is alive. That is when Swordmaster arrives, ignoring Jimmy Woo's orders to inform Amy that he thinks that the kumiho is her. Lin Lie reassures her that he knows it's not, and together they teleport to the location to investigate. Arriving not too far from White Fox's home, both heroes reveal each other's tragic history to comfort each other. The mood quickly changes as they arrive in the village to find the citizens are all undead. To their surprise, it's an illusion from Amy's mother. Overrun with emotion, White Fox goes to hug her, but Swordmaster steps in between them with the sword of Fushi. Lin Lie tells Amy that it's not her mother, and she admits that she knows it. That is when the kumiho attacks, revealing its demonic nature. Using its powerful illusions, it preys on the hero's doubts and weaknesses. White Fox manages to break through her fear and claws a demonic being, but it's not enough. As it lunges at Amy, Swordmaster is there to defend her with the sword of Fushi. The fiend bites down the blade, shattering the divine weapon into 100 shards. Stunned at what has happened, Lin Lie is whipped by the kumiho's snake tails off of a cliff. Enraged that her friend has fallen to his death, White Fox changes into her true form and attacks. Her newfound strength is too much for the demon, and with one final bite to the throat, it dies. As she races down the cliff to the river below, the only trace of Lin Lie is a small fragment of the sword of Fushi. As Tiger Division arrives to help her search for the Swordmaster, Chi-Yu's demons begin attacking all around the world. Now, as I mentioned here at the beginning of the episode, I really like White Fox. The members of Tiger Division that we see in the opening of the book, this Auntie, the sorcerer gambler, yeah, I've got to read that. But when we first see Swordmaster and Wave, they've kind of got the Legolas and Gimli going on from Lord of the Rings, where they're counting down the enemies against one another, like in a competition. I love that. I think that's a pretty good callback. The one thing we're getting here with Lin Lie is this is more about him being a hero and becoming a hero, not the act of just doing what he needs to do, but literally being the hero that's needed to defeat Chi-Yu. And we learned a lot of this when he's telling his backstory. My family has a sacred duty to prevent Chi-Yu, god of war, from rising again and destroying the world. Except they never told me about any of this. I had to find out from a complete stranger while demons were trying to kill me. I've been trying to track down my father and brother, but they're still missing. All I have left is the sword of Fushi, and sometimes I think it can sense my weakness. I'm trying my best, but most days it feels like I have no idea what I'm doing. Like I'm playing hero instead of being one. Heroism isn't an identity, it's a process. It's the answer that White Fox gives him. So again, struggling with becoming the hero, being worthy. And and that's kind of the theme here in this book. That's also kind of the theme in the Black Knight one-shot for King in Black, is him being worthy, because clearly he doesn't want to fight the Grendel symbiote dragons because they're not from Chi-Yu. He is so laser focused on that the sword decides to leave him for Black Knight because it sees that Black Knight actually wants to stop the threat. Could have used Arrow, but it chose Black Knight. It's his story. And during the Masterclass backup story during the Swordmaster series, that features more training with Shang-Chi. That's the whole thing. It's about being worthy. Lin Lie being worthy of the sword. Like, that's the whole conversation that Shang-Chi has with Ares in that story. Because he wants the sword for himself because it can kill gods. So, this whole thing breaks down to this. Being worthy, and that's how this whole story ends up in the end. Being worthy. So, one question I do have before we get into that, because I'm kind of going into the order of the book, is can the sword of Fushi sense evil? Because when Amy goes to hug what she thinks is her mother, which is this demon, this sword has this whoosh sound to it. And like, it almost can sense that it's not what it is. It's not clear, but Lin Lie is not a supernatural being. He has no magical powers. So how would he know that it's a demon? So it makes me think that it's the sword itself. But let's talk about this kumiho. So they're giant white like snow foxes. But this evil one, and it's not a demon, it's just a demonic kumiho. Basically kind of looks like it is rotting, and instead of a big fluffy white tail, it's got a ton of snakes attached to it, which is really cool. The design of this kumiho is pretty cool, and we kind of get her backstory. And she says, this entire land was my kingdom before Sorcerer Supreme Yi Ren sealed me away many centuries ago. So that's cool. We're learning about another Sorcerer Supreme, though very briefly, momentarily. I think that's pretty cool because that's some history for Marvel Comics right here. But she is long dead, and when your current Sorcerer Supreme fell, so did the spells that bound me. I was a kumiho, but now I am so much more. So that's interesting lore that you will learn here if you don't read Doctor Strange is spells set by previous Sorcerer Supreme stay in place as long as the mantle is carried on. I'm assuming that is what's saying there. That would kind of makes a lot of sense. Now, what we don't learn is how this kumiho took on this demonic nature, because in the flashbacks, I mean, it is clearly a kumiho. It just looks normal. It does not look rotted, decayed. It does not have these snake tails. So we don't really learn where that comes from. But still, cool design. I love it. I can see something like this showing up in Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder, which I absolutely love. Like this story, I love the lore that it builds. I'm a big lore guy when it comes to stuff like that. And I could put this monster in a campaign and I would have fun with it. Now, when the snakes attack them, we see that, and this is kind of strange, and I don't know if like the snake bites the Swordmaster on the face, because when it looks into his mind and see his fears, he is pinching his cheek, which is all veined out and red. So I'm not sure if the snake bit him on the cheek, or he's pinching himself trying to wake him up, like maybe he realizes he's in an illusion. But it says, I know your fears. I know your weaknesses. And then we see Chi-Yu, and in each hand, it's got his brother and his father. And the Chi-Yu is kind of designed where some of the horns kind of look like a foxtail. And it looks like some of the wispiness behind it could be hair, but also could be like thousands of foxtails. I don't know if that's done intentionally, but that's kind of how I see it. But it says, I know your weaknesses. I am Chi-Yu, god of war. You are no warrior of the sword of Fushi. Your world will be mine to devour. And we see Chi-Yu take his father and his brother, throw him in the mouth, and they're screaming for him to help. And then he drops the sword, and he's on his hands and knees. No, it can't be. And the kumiho tells him, as it's still Chi-Yu, the sword rejects you. You are nothing. You have failed. And again, as I said, being worthy is what a lot of this has come down to. That's why I've only chosen the stories that I've used, which is this and Black Knight, before we get into the Iron Fist stuff, because they're so important to why he's in the state that he is and why he becomes the Iron Fist. And then this worthiness, we see him become the hero, sacrifice himself to defend Amy, much like he did with the Grendel dragon in Black Knight. And what I don't understand is the sword is bitten down by the kumiho and it shatters and he screams, "No!" So it whips him off with its tail. It says, "The divine sword of Fushi," and he's looking at it as it's shattered. It's shattered. How? And the demon says, "Because it knows just how weak you are." And it flings him off the cliff into the river. Now, the one thing I don't get about how this kumiho demon had broken the sword, if you go into the Masterclass series, Ares is trying to reforge the sword of Fushi because he has stolen it, and he's taken it to some of the craftsmen, which his name is Dekarb, skilled master, smith of Nildavir, which he's one of the dwarves from the Nine Realms. And they're kind of arguing about the sword. The dwarf tells him, "It's as old as we are, unmeltable and unbreakable. But in our hands, it's just a hunk of metal. Still, it's a beautiful hunk of metal. Congratulations. You could kill any mortal on the planet with a blade like this." So, this master craftsman, probably someone who knows of the forging of Mjolnir, depending on what lore, I guess you want to go with Thor and Odin. But, he says it is unbreakable. And we have not seen it break yet. Now, I'm not saying that between Suitor Fiends in War of the Realms, Null Avatars in King in Black, Black Knight, dragons, anything during Atlantis attacks, he has not fought anything this powerful. But the fact that it broke in the kumiho's mouth is wild, just based on what we've just learned from Ares. Now, that makes me wonder if it's not so much of his worthiness, maybe this is what the sword means to happen, and it's not really clear at this point in Lin Lie's story, and we'll cover that here in the next couple of episodes. But because if the sword sensed how weak that he was, and this could just be the issue with different people writing the stories of Lin Lie or just a character in general. I know this is one thing fans always talk about, how comics right now are to the point, especially with Marvel, is that each creator gets usually a 10-12 issue run, and then some of the stuff that they write is either changed or forgotten about with the next writer. And I get all that, and that's fine. I mean, every writer's got their interpretations of everything and a story they want to tell, yada, yada, yada. I get it. I'm trying to write comics myself. I understand all that. But, the issue here is, what was I even trying to get to? Is the worthiness. Okay, yeah. So, here, the kumiho says, "You're not worthy," that's why she's able to shatter it. But if the sword was wanting somebody truly worthy, why would it willingly leave him and go to Dane Whitman? Sensing that there's good in Dane Whitman. Why couldn't it just leave and go to White Fox, who proved her worthiness in this book by breaking through the fear caused by the illusion, just like it did with Dane Whitman, and go to her instead of breaking. I get it. I know it's just part of the story to get us to the next part of Lin Lie's, Iron Fist story and whatnot, but that is one thing I don't understand. So I think there's more to the sword breaking than just simply being broken by a demonic force in this story. And at the end of this, White Fox is determined to find Lin Lie. She has one small fragment of the sword of Fushi. The rest of it is gone. It's the only thing she finds in the river. So, they have not met each other since then. A lot of these characters that Lee knows at this time, he's not met in the Iron Fist series, which will cover that. But we know that White Fox is returning in deadly hands of Kun-Lun, which is supposed to wrap up Lin Lie's story, supposedly. So, we'll see how that goes. But I'm very curious to see how this sword of Fushi is going to play out at the end of all this, because apparently, I'm not saying that it's needed to defeat Chi Yu, but it is one of the weapons that helped defeat Chi Yu. And maybe it's just not the weapon itself, it's the person wielding the weapon. Maybe there's more to it than just, hey, fighting. Sometimes things tend to go that way, storytelling, especially when you look at something so epic and mythical from those sides of folklore. So I'm very curious. But like I said, I don't think the breaking of the sword is just for it to be broken. I think there's a lot more to it than what we're realizing. But that'll wrap up this episode of the Deadly Podcast of Kung Fu. If you want to keep up the podcast, please do so on social media platforms, Twitter, X, Instagram, and Threads. If you got a little kid, you can subscribe to Bubba's Crazy Dinos on YouTube. I only run a Facebook page and an Instagram page. Instagram doesn't seem to be the greatest for kids, but hey, it's there. It's what was recommended. It's what I've got going on. If you like my music while you're on YouTube, go check out Rushing Tiger by Kuro. But most importantly, guys, much like the Black Knight issue, I'm going to go find this in some back issues at my local comic book shops, so I support Andrew at the comic strip and keep reading comics, guys.